Hi everyone, Quiveen here from the comfort of my kitchen. In today's video, we will be looking at constellations and the ecliptic. Of course, we have looked at the ecliptic before when we mentioned the upcoming eclipse. There should be an eclipse on the 28th of October this year, and it should be visible from some parts of Ireland if the weather isn't too bad. The planets, like Saturn and Jupiter, move across the ecliptic in the sky. The ecliptic is essentially the sun's equator if we stretched it out into space. So if we bring up the ecliptic line here, we can see Saturn and Jupiter very close to that line. If we move into morning time, we will see Venus almost exactly on that line. The planets don't perfectly follow the sun's equator, but it is pretty close. For all of the planets we're seeing here, at least, some of the dwarf planets like Pluto can deviate a little further from this line. The moon doesn't exactly follow the ecliptic. The moon follows our equator. So it crosses this line. The ecliptic and our equator are both essentially big circles in the sky when they're stretched out in this way. We can see the moon crossing the line here on the night of the 28th, the full moon, but the moon will cross at different points of this line on different months. The lunar cycle and our orbit around the sun don't match up perfectly. So sometimes the moon will cross the line when it's full and we'll get an eclipse. Other times it will cross the line at some other point and we won't get an eclipse. We will talk more about eclipses in a future video. For now, we're going to take a look at how the planets are moving. Of course, the Earth is turning, and so the planets will appear to move across the sky. And of course, we are orbiting around the sun as well. So night by night, the planets will appear to change position, moving closer to the sunset until they disappear behind the sun, at least for these planets that are outside of our orbit. If we take a closer look, and we'll start by taking a closer look at Venus way down here, we'll see that Venus moves in front of the stars that are behind it. So if we take a close look at Venus and move through a couple of days, we can see that Venus is moving independently of the stars. Of course, the stars don't really move on a human timescale. They do move, but they're so far away and moving across such huge distances, we don't really notice. Planets, however, especially planets like Venus that are close to the sun, well, they're moving a lot faster. So we can notice that Venus is moving ahead of this background of stars. This is one of the things that informed people such as the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans that planets were a little bit different to stars. They wandered across the sky. They didn't seem to form part of the seemingly fixed patterns of stars that we see beyond the planets. It's not too hard to see it happening with Venus. Venus's year is shorter than our own. But for planets like Jupiter that move around the sun a little bit slower, and we'll keep Jupiter in the center of the screen here, it can take a little bit longer to notice. So here's Jupiter, and we can definitely see that it is moving independently of these stars. Especially with planets that are closer to the sun than we are, things can get a little bit more complicated. We may be moving, and so the planets may appear to move in one direction, but the planets are also moving on their own around the sun. So this can make it appear that planets are moving backwards through the sky, which is a phenomenon known as Mercury in retrograde when it happens to Mercury, but it can happen to the other planets as well. We're going to get back to the exact motion of the planets and how they move across the sky again in a later video. What we're going to quickly go through now are the constellations that are on the ecliptic. We're going to do so for the night of the full moon for the 28th of October, just so that the moon is in the right place and so that things are appropriately difficult to see. We're also going to start by doing this in the city, where things will be, well, almost impossible to recognize. If we bring up the lines of our constellations, we can see that for several constellations, many of the stars are pretty much invisible. But we can at least see the planets clearly, even if we're in the city. For example, if we take a look at Saturn over here, Saturn is in the constellation of Aquarius. But if you don't have these lines to help you, well, the stars that make up Aquarius are pretty faint, and it can be difficult to draw the picture of the water carrier. However, if you know that Saturn is in Aquarius, well, Saturn is going to stay in Aquarius for several more days, right through until next month. So we have plenty of time to rely on the fact that if you're looking for Aquarius, all you need to do is find Saturn. By a similar token, if we take a look at Jupiter over here with the moon, Jupiter is in the constellation of Aries. Aries is mapped out by this line up here in these two stars. Those stars are reasonably easy to see. They're reasonably bright, even near the light of the full moon, but turning these two dots into a ram with horns, well, that certainly takes a lot of imagination. It's one of those things that's best to learn and remember. So these two stars together make up Aries the ram, and for the next couple of months, Jupiter will be in that constellation. So if you find Jupiter, you found Aries. If you find Saturn, you found Aquarius. If you know the constellations that lie along the ecliptic, you'll know that between Aquarius and Aries is Pisces, the fish. These constellations are some of the most famous. They're the constellations where we see the moon always passing through this part of the sky. It's the constellations where we see the planets, again, always on this line, but it is also where we see the sun. If we move all the way up to daytime, there's Venus. There's the sun on the line of the ecliptic. Because we orbit the sun's equator, and the ecliptic is essentially the sun's equator projected into space, we will always see the sun on this line, on the ecliptic. If I get rid of the atmosphere, of course, we'll see everything a lot more clearly. And if I get rid of the ground, we'll be able to see all of the constellations at the same time. So we can see there that the sun is just in the end of the constellation Virgo, and it will be moving into Libra. We can also see that towards the end of October, as we come into November, Mercury is moving out into Libra, and that's going to make it easier to see at sunset. Whereas Mars continuing its path around the back of the sun, so it won't be visible for another couple of months. After Libra, we have Scorpius the Scorpion. A lot of Scorpius is below the horizon for us here in Ireland. Coming in towards the middle of the Milky Way, we've got Sagittarius, the archer or the bowman. And then we have Capricorn, the hippocamp, or Capricornus. Then we've got Saturn, there's Aquarius, Pisces, we've got Jupiter and Aries. Taurus is where we find the Pleiades. So if you spot the seven sisters, you've also found the constellation of Taurus. Moving forward, we've got Gemini the twins, one of the few constellations that actually looks like the picture it's supposed to be. This looks like two people holding hands, two very wonky stick figures, and indeed this is Gemini the twins, two people together. Then we have Cancer the crab, followed by Leo the lion. Venus is almost in between Virgo and Leo over the next couple of days. It will be a little bit more in Leo while we're in October. And then we're back to Virgo and the sun. Now, of course, I've skipped one. There is one more constellation, and we can see the line of this constellation crossing the ecliptic. It does so around the 14th to the 16th of December. The sun will be on this part of the line where this constellation crosses. So very quickly, I will bring up the pictures and also the names. So again, starting here with, we'll start with sunset. The sun goes down, we won't see Mercury, we won't see Mars, they're far too close to the sun. We might catch some of the stars of Libra, but they are very, very faint. And of course, Scorpius is very close to the horizon. Antares is a wonderfully bright star, but it might set too early. This is then followed by the knee, just a tiny part of Ophiuchus, the snake bearer or the serpent carrier. So we can see three constellations here. Ophiuchus, the person who carries the snake. Serpens cauda, the tail of the snake, and Serpens caput, the head of the snake. And then, of course, moving back to the more traditional zodiacal constellations, we've got Sagittarius the bowman there, which you definitely can see just above the horizon around sunset. This is followed by Capricornus the hippocamp. So a hippocamp is really, if a goat had a mermaid, this is half goat and half fish. Then we have Aquarius, the water bearer, with Saturn again. Pisces, these are very faint stars, so it can be difficult to spot them in the city, but between Saturn and Aries, that's where you will find Pisces. Jupiter in Aries. Then we have Taurus, again with the seven sisters. Out here we've got Gemini the twins. Pollux and Castor are the names of the twins, so that is the name of the two brightest stars. We can also see Vesta out there. We'll talk about that some other time. Then we have Cancer the crab, one of the very faint constellations again. Leo with Venus, and then back to Virgo just as the sun is rising. So we won't see too much of Virgo at this time of the year. So all of those constellations, those famous 12, they are out there in the sky, but it can be quite tricky to find them and very tricky as well to recognize them. But they are out there, and with that little bit of help, knowing what planets are in what constellation, I really hope you get a chance to see them over the next few days. If you enjoyed this video, please do subscribe to this YouTube channel and of course like the video if you liked it. You can also check out a small write-up of these videos on my website, quebeanscontent.ie. Until next time, hopefully I will see you then.